What if I told you World War I and World War II weren't two separate wars? What if they were one continuous property dispute that killed 100 million people? What if every battle, every death, every bomb dropped was about who gets to own land? Forget everything you learned in school. This is the war they never taught you. 1908. The Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe, sits on something nobody yet understands will change everything. Oil. British geologists discover massive reserves in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. Suddenly, the empire everyone mocked becomes the most valuable property on Earth. Britain has a problem. They don't own it. Yet. Germany starts building the Berlin-Baghdad Railway. Why does a railway matter? Because whoever controls transportation controls the oil. Britain sees their future fuel supply. Their entire naval fleet runs on coal, about to convert to oil, under German control. This railway isn't infrastructure. It's a declaration of economic war, and Britain cannot allow it. June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated in Sarajevo. History tells you this started World War I. That's not wrong, but it's incomplete. This assassination was the match, but the powder keg? Decades of property disputes, colonial competition, and the scramble to control Ottoman land and resources. They needed an excuse for war. A Serbian nationalist gave them one. Before the war even starts, Britain, France, and Russia sign secret treaties dividing the Ottoman Empire. The Constantinople Agreement, the Treaty of London. They're literally planning who gets what property before they've conquered it. Imagine neighbors deciding to divide your house while you're still living in it, then starting a fire to force you out.
1916. The war is raging, millions dying in trenches. And in a London office, two men, Mark Sykes and Francois-Georges Picot, are drawing lines on a map with a ruler. Straight lines, ignoring rivers, mountains, tribes, cultures, religions. These lines will become Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan. They're inventing countries based on who gets which property. And these borders still causing wars today.
Here's where it gets criminal. Britain promises the same land, Palestine, to 3 different groups. To Arabs, independence if they fight the Ottomans. To France, joint control via Sykes-Picot. To Jews, a homeland via the Balfour Declaration. How do you promise the same property 3 times? Easy, when you're lying to everyone, and you control the guns. World War I ends. The League of Nations creates mandates, supposedly temporary administration of former Ottoman territories until they can govern themselves. Temporary? Britain kept Palestine for 30 years. France kept Syria for 26 years. The mandate system wasn't trusteeship. It was colonialism with a diplomatic name. Legal theft on a map. And the oil? The Anglo-Persian Oil Company, now BP, gets exclusive rights to Iranian oil. The Turkish Petroleum Company, later Iraq Petroleum Company, carved up between British, French, Dutch, and American companies. Zero went to the people who lived there. WWII wasn't about democracy or freedom. It was the largest resource heist in history, executed under the cover of war. Treaty of Versailles. Germany loses all colonies. Tanganyika, Cameroon, Namibia, Pacific Islands redistributed to the victors. 14 million Africans and Pacific Islanders transferred like property in a divorce. Not one African leader was invited to Versailles. Why would they be? You don't ask the property what it thinks about being sold. Germany loses 13% of its European territory. 7 million Germans now living in other countries. The Rhineland demilitarized, the Saar controlled by France. Danzig made a free city. Reparation so extreme the economy collapses. Germany didn't just lose the war. They lost property, pride, and economic future. And a wounded animal is the most dangerous. But here's what's insane. Between the wars, British and American companies are doing business with German corporations. Standard Oil shares patents with IG Farben, the chemical company that will later make Zyklon B for gas chambers. Ford builds factories in Germany. War is coming, everyone knows it, but profit comes first. Property and profit transcend politics. Hitler writes Mein Kampf in 1925. Chapter 14, Eastern Orientation or Eastern Policy. His plan is explicit. Germany needs Lebensraum, living space, the land to the east, Ukraine's farmland, Russia's resources. He's not hiding it. He's publishing a property acquisition plan that requires genocide and calling it destiny. And Western powers, they're reading it and doing nothing. 1938, Austria annexed. 1938, Sudetenland seized. 1939, Czechoslovakia occupied. Each time, Hitler's justification is the same. Ethnic Germans live there, so it's rightfully German property. Notice the pattern? It's the same logic used to colonize America, Australia, Africa. Our people are there, so the land is ours. Western powers built empires on this logic. Now they're shocked Hitler's using it in Europe. August 23, 1939. The world is stunned. Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia sign a non-aggression pact. But there's a secret protocol. They're dividing Eastern Europe between them. Poland, Finland, Baltic states, carved up like a pie. Two ideological enemies agreeing on one thing: property division. This isn't about communism versus fascism. It's about who owns what. September 1, 1939. Germany invades Poland from the west. History remembers this. World War II begins. September 17, 1939. Soviets invade Poland from the east. History forgets this. Poland isn't just defeated, it's erased, divided, property seized by both invaders. 6 million Poles will die. Their country won't exist again until 1945. And when it returns, different borders, different property owners, nothing returned. 1941. Nazis create General Plan Ost, the general plan for the East. The document is chilling. Remove 80 to 85% of Poles, 65% of Ukrainians, 75% of Belarusians. Kill them, starve them, deport them, replace them with German settlers. This is industrial-scale property theft with a timeline. And the Holocaust, part of this plan. Remove the existing population. Claim the property. Before the killing centers, there was systematic property seizure. 100,000 Jewish businesses Aryanized, apartments redistributed, bank accounts frozen and confiscated. The Holocaust wasn't just genocide, it was the most thorough property transfer in history. Every victim was also a property owner who lost everything. And after the war, Most property was never returned. The theft was permanent. The Eastern Front. 27 million Soviets dead. But here's what the numbers hide. 25 million homeless. 1,710 cities destroyed. 70,000 villages burned. This wasn't just military combat. It was property destruction as military strategy. Both sides used it. Nazis burning everything as they advanced. Soviets burning everything as they retreated. Leave nothing for the enemy to claim. Leningrad. 872 days under siege. 1 million civilians dead, most from starvation. Why didn't Hitler just conquer it? Because his plan wasn't occupation, it was erasure. Starve the population, let them die, demolish the city, erase it from maps. You can't claim property from dead owners. This was warfare as property clearance, medieval siege tactics with modern weaponry. 1943, Stalingrad, the tide turns. As Soviets push west, they're not just liberating, they're claiming. Every mile west is future Soviet property. Eastern Poland, now Soviet territory. Eastern Romania, Soviet. Baltic states, Soviet. They're not restoring borders, they're redrawing them. Property payment for 27 million dead. November 1943. Tehran. The Big Three meet. Stalin demands Poland move westward. Take the idea in. Move an entire country. Eastern Poland becomes Soviet. To compensate Poland, give them Eastern Germany. It's not about people or nations, it's about property lines drawn by three men who decided 30 million people would be relocated whether they liked it or not. February 1945, Yalta. Germany is still fighting, but the victors are already dividing the property. Eastern Europe, Soviet sphere. Western Europe, Allied sphere. Germany itself, divided into 4 zones. Japan, to be invaded. These decisions, made in a Crimean palace, will determine property rights for 100 million people. And not one of those people was asked. 1945-1950. The largest forced migration in history. 12 million Germans expelled from Eastern Europe. 2 million Poles moved from east to west. Hungarians expelled from Czechoslovakia. Ukrainians and Belarusians relocated. Imagine, you're told you have 24 hours. Take what you can carry. Your home now belongs to someone else. Legal, international law, approved at Potsdam. The Cold War wasn't about ideology, it was about property. Who controls Europe's industrial capacity, its resources, its markets? The Berlin blockade, a dispute over access to property in a divided city. The Iron Curtain, a property line enforced with guns and walls. Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, every Cold War conflict was about which economic system controlled which property. Nuremberg trials. Nazis prosecuted for crimes against humanity. Justice served? Look at who's not on trial. The industrialists who profited. Krupp, IG Farben executives, the banks that financed the regime. They get light sentences or walk free. Why? Because prosecuting property crimes would expose that Western corporations were complicit. Can't put the system itself on trial. 1945. 8 million displaced persons in Europe. Camps set up for temporary shelter. Temporary becomes years.
These people want to go home, but home is gone, destroyed, occupied, borders changed, and their property seized. When they file claims for restitution, they're told prove ownership, but the deeds were burned, the records destroyed, the witnesses dead. How do you prove you owned something when the entire legal system was erased?
1948. The Marshall Plan. America gives $13 billion to rebuild Europe. Generous, right? Look closer. The money must be spent on American goods. American companies get the contracts. American banks finance the loans. It's not charity, it's economic colonization. Buy their property when it's cheap, rebuild it with our materials, and own the market forever. Brilliant.
Meanwhile, in the Pacific, Japan loses all colonial property. Korea, Taiwan, Manchuria, gone. The Zaibatsu, massive family-controlled corporations, ordered dissolved by American occupation. Land reform forced on Japanese landlords. In America, Japanese-American citizens lose everything. 120,000 interned. Property sold for pennies while they're imprisoned. War guilt becomes property seizure.
1947. UN partitions Palestine. 1948. War erupts. 750,000 Palestinians flee or are expelled. Israeli historians call it the War of Independence. Palestinian historians call it the Nakba, the catastrophe. Both are describing a property war. 418 Palestinian villages destroyed, 50,000 homes demolished, property claims that are still being fought over today, because World War II's property disputes never ended.
1950. Israel passes the absentee property law. If you fled during the war, even if you fled to the other side of town and came back 3 days later, your property is now absentee, and the state can take it. It's the same legal mechanism used in World War II. Displaced persons lose property rights, except this time it's being written into permanent law. Stalin's prize, Eastern Europe. But these aren't allies, they're economic colonies. East Germany pays war reparations by dismantling factories and shipping them to Russia. Poland's coal mines exploited for Soviet industry. Romania's oil, Soviet prices. Hungary's agriculture, Soviet quotas. The property isn't just controlled, it's extracted. Colonial economics with communist branding. Stalin's prize, Eastern Europe. But these aren't allies, they're economic colonies. East Germany pays war reparations by dismantling factories and shipping them to Russia. Poland's coal mines exploited for Soviet industry. Romania's oil, Soviet prices. Hungary's agriculture, Soviet quotas. The property isn't just controlled, it's extracted. Colonial economics with communist branding. Britain's empire liquidated, but not peacefully. India and Pakistan partitioned. 1 million dead in property disputes over who gets which territory. Palestine abandoned to civil war. Kenya's Mau Mau uprising crushed with torture camps, protecting white settlers' property. Malaysia's emergency, preserving rubber plantations. Every independence is a property negotiation written in blood. But here's the trick. Empires didn't end, they privatized. Anglo-Iranian Oil Company becomes BP. United Fruit Company controls Central American governments. Mining corporations in Africa answer to London and New York boards, not local governments.
Why fight expensive wars to control property when you can sign contracts with corrupt leaders who'll sell their nation's resources for personal wealth? Every Cold War conflict is a property war disguised as ideology. Iran, 1953, oil. Guatemala, 1954, banana plantations. Cuba, 1961, sugar and casinos. Vietnam, rubber and strategic ports. Chile, 1973, copper mines. Afghanistan, 1979, oil pipeline routes. The superpowers aren't spreading democracy or communism. They're fighting over who controls property and resources. The names change, the game stays the same. 1973. Nixon creates the petrodollar system. Oil must be bought in U.S. dollars. Saudi Arabia agrees to only accept dollars for oil and to invest the profits in U.S. Treasury bonds. This is genius. America doesn't need to physically control Middle Eastern oil property. They control the currency it's sold in. Financial colonialism. No armies required. 1982. Falklands War. Britain and Argentina fight over frozen islands with 1,800 people. Why? Property. The islands themselves are worthless, but the territorial waters, potentially massive oil reserves. 649 Argentinians dead, 255 British dead, for property rights to oil nobody had even found yet. And when oil is discovered in 2010, British companies get the contracts. 1991. Soviet Union collapses. The largest property redistribution in history begins. State assets worth trillions sold in rigged auctions for millions. Mikhail Khodorkovsky buys Yukos Oil, worth $40 billion, for $300 million in a loans for shares scheme. Roman Abramovich gets Sibneft for pennies. 7 oligarchs control 50% of Russia's economy by 1998. It's not privatization, it's the greatest heist in human history. 1991 to 1995. Yugoslavia tears itself apart. We're told it's ethnic hatred. It is, but it's also property. Bosnia's war includes systematic ethnic cleansing, forcing populations out to claim their property. Srebrenica, 8,000 men massacred. Why? Clear the property owners. Kosovo, Albanian homes burned by Serbs, then Serbian homes burned by Albanians. Every atrocity has a property deed underneath it. 2003. Iraq. We're told it's about weapons of mass destruction. No WMDs found. But Order 39, issued by Paul Bremer in 2003, allows 100% foreign ownership of Iraqi assets, except oil. Oil exception seems noble, until you realize foreign companies get contracts to extract it. 500,000 Iraqis dead. For property access, dressed up as liberation. Afghanistan. 20 years, $2 trillion spent. We're told it's about terrorism. But look at the maps. Afghanistan sits on $1 trillion in mineral deposits, rare earth elements, copper, lithium for batteries, and it's the perfect location for a gas pipeline from Central Asia to Pakistan. The war on terror? More like a war for property access that never materialized. Syria. Civil war starts 2011. We're told it's about democracy and dictatorship. But look deeper. 2 proposed gas pipelines. One from Qatar through Syria to Europe, backed by the West. One from Iran through Syria to Europe, backed by Russia. Assad chooses the Russian pipeline. Shortly after, the civil war begins. 500,000 dead, half the population displaced over competing pipeline routes. 2014, Ukraine. Russia annexes Crimea and backs separatists in Donbass. Why? Property. Ukraine is the gas transit route from Russia to Europe. If Ukraine joins NATO and EU, Russia loses control of this asset. Crimea has Sevastopol, Russia's only warm-water naval port. 14,000 dead by 2022. Then 2022 happens, full invasion. Still about property, still about control. The pattern never changes. Right now, South China Sea. China builds artificial islands to claim territorial waters. Why? 11 billion barrels of oil, 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, and 30% of global shipping passes through. China, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan, all claiming the same property. This is where World War III could start, over underwater property lines. See the pattern? World War I, Ottoman property. World War II, European property and Lebensraum. Korea, industrial control. Vietnam, resources and strategic position. Falklands, oil. Yugoslavia, ethnic property claims. Iraq, oil access. Afghanistan, minerals and pipelines. Syria, gas routes. Ukraine, gas transit and naval ports. Every war, every conflict, strip away the propaganda and you find property. 100 million dead in 2 world wars. We built monuments, wrote "Never Again" in stone, taught children about the horrors of war. But we never taught them the truth. The wars were about property. And because we never learned the real lesson, the wars never stopped. They just moved, from Europe to Asia to Africa to the Middle East. Different flags, different languages, same reason. Property, land, resources, control. Until we admit what war actually is, violent property dispute, we'll keep repeating it. The question isn't if there will be another world war. The question is, which property are we willing to kill for next?